welcome to you all. I know most of you. I'm Danielle Story. I'm the CEO of Eastern Innovation. It gives me great delight to welcome our chair, Daryl Marnie, who's on our screen. Give us a wave, Daryl. And he's here as well, and our team, and a few people are coming in as we speak. I'd like to acknowledge that we all meet on the lands of the Australian Aboriginal people, except for you, Mark. But your home base is here of many nations. I'm currently on the Kulin Nations, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I do pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. As we kick in, I'm going to get in really quickly and introduce Mark, because I'm really excited to hear what he's got to say. Welcome. I'm not sure if that is Sarah or Scott, and welcome, Riz. Great to see you. And we've got, we can all give Vlad a wave when he comes in as well. Lovely to have you, Sarah. Okay, so here we are again on our Eastern Vic Founders Meetup evening. I hope you've all got either some pizza or a glass of wine. Liz, if you just take your put your camera on for a second, we'll be able to show you. There she is. There's the pizza and the beer for you all. Okay, if you haven't, got some of your own, I hope that we can catch up soon and have a bite and have a drink. Thanks, Liz. You can always come off. You can jump off again now. And thanks to Liz for all the work that she's done bringing this all together. Tonight, we have the pleasure of hearing from one of our specialists, and the other specialist has just joined us as well, Vlad Finn. Over the past 2 years, we've been very fortunate to have support from Oz Industry in the Expert in Residence program, the Incubator Support Fund. That Expert in Residence program has allowed us to bring, firstly, Vlad and then Mark into our community, and we've helped them fall in love with our vision and our mission to actively impact startups and the innovation ecosystem across Victoria and across Australia. I met Mark in 2018, and Mark was pop. He'd come from Hong Kong. He still is in Hong Kong right now. In fact, his apartment is very close to the people that are controlling the repatriation of China into Hong Kong. So he has some interesting times ahead of him. And he has not yet been able to get back to Australia due to COVID and other complications. But that hasn't stopped him. Mark, I met when he was looking to populate an accelerator program in Hong Kong for a Chinese family business that consisted of many businesses and organisations in everything from hospitality to finance to technology and accommodation and what have you. And this accelerator program had a point of difference, and I fell in love with him the moment he said to me, we don't focus on our founders looking for investment, we focus on our founders growing sustainable businesses, growing their revenue, growing their proper business skills, and keeping their businesses clean so that later their businesses are highly fundable and highly attractive. And I said, oh, that is exactly what the world of innovation needs. We are going to work together one day. The Oz Industry program allowed us to bring Mark on board and to be one of our experts in residence in the development of the GAP program, an advisory board program, something that Alira and I have been working on over the last couple of years. Is we really want to provide a domain advisory program so that our founders have access to the best people to help them grow those very sustainable, revenue generating innovation businesses. Fortunately, Mark and I and Alira and Vlad was so enthusiastic about it, all came together and said, let's make this happen. And over the last 4 months, Mark has done that. Mark has generously offered to come on tonight to share with us what the things that you need to know to bring on advisors, because we all know that the right advisors make or break, or advisors can make or break an innovation venture, because scaling happens very quickly. It needs to happen really quickly, and it needs to happen with the right advice. So Mark, I hope I've done you justice. You've actually done far more than run an accelerator program in Hong Kong, and I know that you will introduce that. You're very highly regarded globally, and the people that you've brought to us globally, along with Vlad, are people that have looked at what we're doing and they're very excited about it. So I will introduce you to Mark.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. That was lovely, and it is true. It was 2018. Might have been end of 2018 where we connected, and it's true. I was setting up an accelerator program for a family in Hong Kong, a conglomerate company. So that's the journey that really got me passionate about advisory boards. I have a very mixed background. I've been in technology, I've been in consulting, I was an accountant for a while, an auditor. I did software implementation, I did software sales, I ran my own business, I did strategy. Basically, I didn't know what to do, so I tried a lot of things. And in the end, I worked with this Chinese family for close to 4 years, and they were a $70 billion conglomerate, and they charged me with diversification and getting them out of Hong Kong. And so it was like, well, there's all these successful people. How do I get these siloed businesses to act more effectively and efficiently, work with new and upcoming partners, and think outside of what they've known for the last 30 or 40 years. And while it's not a new concept, we said, well, the accelerator is the best way to do it, but do it as a corporate accelerator where it is driven by startups looking for growth rather than investment. If we get the growth, the investment will come. I was lucky enough to also have an investment fund that was behind me that I could make investments in startups. So we set up this this accelerator program, and I was determined to be different. I was determined to be successful. So I also wanted to make sure it was completely independent of the family. Any engagement with the corporations or the different business units was done on a arm's length arrangement. There was no favoritism or expectation or freebies. It had to be commercial. It was my job to get the commercials and the startups together, but I needed the startups to have this ability to talk to people outside of this conglomerate world. And so I employed the advisory board. I'd been on advisory boards for a number of organizations, some effective, many ineffective. And I had this vision that an organization that had a very effectively managed advisory board would actually achieve more than those that didn't. And there's a lot of research out there, but research is research. I just had this gut feeling it was true, so I convinced my bosses that I was right, and that we would do this, and they gave me a free rein. And what we found was that the startups where we put in place the advisors and manage the advisory board versus allowing the startups to manage their own advisors were hugely more successful. And it was because we went out and independently matched advisors to the needs of the startup, and then we acted as the facilitator between the startup and the advisors and kept both sides accountable. And we saw that had a huge impact on the way the two parties worked together, and it had huge success. And in the end, we resulted in 80% of the participants in the program getting corporate contracts post the program and achieving their growth objectives, and 60% of the participants getting external funding. So we ended up funding all of them, but 60% of them immediately went on to get funding, including the largest pre-Series A funding in Hong Kong up until that date. Now it's been overtaken now, unfortunately, but I had a moment where I could say I had the biggest raise. Didn't last long. And that's when I fell in love with advisory boards. And on leaving Stan Group, that was the name of the company that I was working with. On leaving Stan Group, I got more involved in advisory boards and went, there's got to be something better than this. So that's where I worked with Danielle and Vlad and Alira to really sort of pitch to them that there's this advisory board concept, the managed advisory board concept that I was passionate about. And thankfully, they drank the Kool-Aid, and we've been prototyping it and working it for the last few months. And I believe we have one of the CEOs from one of the pilot companies here, Saj. He's one of our prototype companies going through the program. So at the end, he might even want to say a few words, not to put you on the spot, Saj. But
Thank you for that.
But that's the background. So I've become very, very passionate about advisors and advisory boards. But I also know that not every advisory board is functional, and not every advisor works out. So tonight's discussion, and please do, raise your hand if you have questions, is about setting sort of the, first of all, the definition of what I see as an advisor, how to engage with those advisors, and how to make it really beneficial to you and the advisors if you are a startup or an early stage company. So that's the plan. So I will share my screen if I can. I assume I'm allowed to. Looks like I can. Now, hopefully that means everybody can see my little PDF.
All good.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So really the PDF is to keep me on track. There's not much contact in there. It's just headings to keep me on track, and also to make sure that if I am going off topic, you know what I'm meant to be talking about. So the topic of tonight is advisors for startups and how to attract and manage them. Oops, forgot, not in PowerPoint. So I wanted to start by actually putting together a definition of what is an advisor, because this word means different things to different people. For some, it's a consultant. For some, it's a coach. For some, it's a mentor. And it doesn't mean that my version of an advisor will work for everybody, but we've had very good success with the model that we've used. So to make it fair, start with what is an advisor. I'll use my definition. If somebody wants to ask questions or challenge me on that, I'm absolutely open to conversation and as to why I've defined it this way. So in the context of startups and business, an advisor is an expert that is there to really support your ideation and your path seeking and decision making within the business. They are not a consultant that does the work for you. They should not be somebody that's there to make you feel good about what you're doing. It should be a respectful relationship where your advisor can challenge you respectfully and has the ability to say, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, and here's why. And it's very important that it's the and here's why to bring in their experience. Likewise, the advisor needs to be somebody very safe that you can raise stupid ideas with, because you don't know they're stupid usually until you verbalize them with somebody. The main purpose of an advisor is to get you to focus on the right things for you and your business at the right time. Now, in doing that, that means that an advisor may change. The value of an advisor may change over time. The advisors you need today may be different to the advisors you need in 3 or 6 months. And it's really important to understand that an advisor should not be a job for life, and it shouldn't just be your buddy. And that's a common mistake. People go out to their network and ask people that they are friends with to be their advisors. It can work, but often it doesn't work. So in my definition, an advisor is an independent body that will speak honestly to you about your decision-making process and the needs of your company, and help you with that decision-making process with expert advice. And if they don't have that expert advice, they'll be honest enough to say that. They may even go out to get it for you, but they are there to help you. And it's different to a coach, and it's different to a mentor. Okay, so and the reason I make that distinction is a coach will generally be somebody that tries to get you to make your own decision making. You know, if I just do a brief role playing for a moment, the types of questions you would interaction with a coach would be, you know, I'm to a coach, you might say, I'm thinking about going into this market. And a coach would say, what research have you done? How did you come to that decision? How can you be comfortable in that decision? A coach is there to really to affirm your thinking and get you to feel comfortable with what you've done, and to get you to realize the tools and methodologies you have available to you to execute on your vision. A mentor is somebody who generally asks for advice, where you say, what do you think? I'm going to go into this market, Mr. Mentor. What do you think? You've been there in the past. What would you have done, or what do? Whereas an advisor, the questioning might be the same as the mentor, but it's, okay, this is my plan. Take it apart. Work with me on making it better. How can I make this better? How can you put inputs into this? Where are the issues? What are the risks associated with this? Okay. Does that sort of put into picture how I perceive the advisor versus the coach versus the mentor? Does anybody have any?
That's gold, Mark. And if anybody wants to ask a question, go for it.
Please do. And if you want, you can whack it in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat. All right. So what is an advisor? We've covered that one off. Next is, what is an advisory board? Hopefully everybody here is familiar with a board of directors and the functions of a board of director. Traditionally, especially in Australia, traditionally a board of directors is very much around governance. Are we doing things the right way? Are we making the decisions that are the right decisions for the different stakeholders of the business? Board of directors have legal liability to the company and to the stakeholders. So there is a lot of risk assessment in these decision makings. And given the legal liability of a director, there is a tendency to be risk adverse. Not always, but often. The CEO typically reports to the board, and the board provides governance over the direction. So when strategy is being set, the board may be involved in the strategy, but ultimately they need to approve the strategy direction of the company and provide some oversight on risk management. Okay, so how does that differ to an advisory board? Well, this is where an advisory board can be a lot of fun. So first of all, hopefully, an advisory board takes on multiple advisors and puts them into a structured environment. The advisory board doesn't have a legal obligation to the company. So it becomes a safe place to talk about risks, to talk about what ifs, to talk about harebrained ideas. The advisory board can act as a sounding board for strategy and ideas and directions before it goes to a board of directors. So that as a founder or as an executive team, you can have your crazy moments with all these experts in the advisory board where they have their lovely ideation. You can come to a consensus and say, look, balancing risk and reward, this is probably the best solution, and taking it to the board of directors, which will want to know that you've assessed all the risks, the alternatives, what your mitigation strategies are, and how you're going to manage the finances in any of these plans, can be brainstormed, ideated, and worked out in the advisory board, and therefore tested prior to going to a board of directors, and therefore allow the executive team, CEO, to be in a lot better and stronger position when discussing with their board. Now, as a startup, you might not have a board, but eventually you will. The advisory board becomes that safe space to make silly statements, to test silly ideas. And that's the important aspect. It's really to test, hey, I want to go and do something in the digital space, and it's this, and it's got nothing to do with what I do today. My advisors, my advisory board, come and help me on this journey. Hopefully the advisory board is made up of a number of experts that match your business, if you've done it right, to be able to give you their advice and their direction for you as the CEO or the executive team to make the decision. And here's another key difference between the advisory board and the board of directors. The board of directors employ the CEO, or they should. Sometimes the board and the CEO are the same people in small companies. The CEO has a legal obligation to the board, and the board has a legal obligation to the CEO. The board can sack a CEO. Okay. In an advisory board, the CEO does not have to listen to the advisory board. It means that the advisory board also has to pitch to the CEO. So it's a two-way. Advisors are there because they're smart and they're experts, but they're not always going to be right. The idea is that the CEO is given enough ammunition to make the right decisions, and the experts should be there pitching, convincing. And this is an important factor. Advisors don't get to tell you what to do. They advise you and you make the decision. Trusted advisors you will listen to more often than not, but you may take what you've discussed with your advisory board, what you've tested, and still hone it out a little bit. That's your own. In a board of directors, once a strategy is set, when that changes, the CEO should be going back to the board to make major modifications. Okay, and that's an important aspect. The CEO is not bound by the advisory board's decision-making process, whereas under a board of directors, they are. This is fantastic in terms of its flexibility. If you set up a very high-functioning advisory board, you have a powerful set of ideation, decision-making processes available to you. What makes a good advisory board? Okay, before I go on, any questions on what an advisory board is? No questions coming back?
Everybody's all good. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Right, you've covered that very well.
Covered that. So, what makes a good advisory board? Diversity. We hear about diversity all the time. And while it is important in terms of diversity from background, what makes the advisory board really valuable to you as a decision maker is diversity in skill set. This is a great way to supplement gaps in your own skill set. As a CEO, especially in a startup, you'll hire people to do a job that you need done. And unless you're absolutely amazing, there will be blind spots. There will be areas that you're not so good at. And you can only hire so many people. Your ability to hire experts into the organization is limited. There's also the boss-employee relationship side, where employees, depending on your culture, the relationship you set up, the type of employee you get, they may not be willing to be completely transparent and open and honest with you. In comes the advisor. On a board of advisors where you have a select group of individuals with backgrounds that you need for the stage of your startup, you're starting to build a group of advisors that can help you now. So for example, if you're about to expand internationally, getting somebody that's done international commercialization type of work before on your advisory board, it's a fabulous way to get started at low cost with low risk, rather than hiring the wrong person into your organization to take you down a path that may be wrong. You hire somebody overseas, New York, San Francisco, Hong Kong, to do that internationalization, that overseas selling, and they're the wrong person, that costs you 6 months plus a whole lot of salary. You get an expert on your advisory board that's there to advise you. It gives you a whole different aspect, because these people are there to show their value immediately. Okay? And it's open. And in an advisory board that's working well, they'll be held accountable by the other advisors, which are open. You know, they don't feel intimidated by another advisor. They're there for a reason. They're experts in their field, and they're going to ask questions of the other advisors. A high-functioning advisory board will have those gaps in your knowledge, in your expertise within the business, and they will be comfortable in their own skin. So not only will they advise you, but they will challenge each other. And I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to kind of call on Saj in this one. Saj, we set up an advisory board for you, so I'm glad you came on. Everybody, this wasn't set up in advance. This is Saj, we put together a very different group of advisors for your advisory board. How did you find that? If you don't mind me putting you on the spot.
The diversity of the group, do you mean?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, look, it was very challenging, very confronting, at the beginning. You've got 5 or 6 experts in front of you that are just questioning you. And that's just for them to find out what is going on. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? What's happening over here? And it really does, it puts you right in the heart of making you think about your actions. But the diversity of it was you were being questioned across such a wide variety of the areas. But what we got out of it, it was like a strengthening process. It was like carbon going in and diamonds coming out. That's all I can
I
say.
like that.
Yeah, it's one challenging, confronting, and don't get me wrong, we welcomed it, but it was not easy. It really made you look at your pain points and why you're not looking at that, why you're doing it this way. Maybe you should be doing it that way. And it made you look back to where you're not doing it well enough. I know there was a number of conversations where, no, don't do it like this, do it like that. No, I don't know how to do it like that, you know. And so you're really going back to checking in with your ego and putting all that aside and go, listen to the experts. That's what they're there for. But like I said, what came out of it was a broad range of knowledge, deep insights, valuable directions and strategy. Looking at it now, how valuable it wasn't pleasant to go through at the beginning. That's what we do.
And that's a good point, Sarge. It's an absolutely good point. One of the needs in a high-functioning advisory board is that ability for people to ask confronting questions. And a problem that I often see in startups and in businesses, and something that frustrated me, was that I would sit on advisory boards and it would be somebody's friends. And everybody was very nice, like, you're doing a great job. Have you thought about this? Go away and think about that and come back to us when you're ready. You're in business. The purpose of an advisory board is to advise you and get you to the next level. The people need to be respectful. And so to make the advisory board very high functioning, what we encourage and what we did for Sarge was make sure that there was an independent facilitator or chair, somebody that managed the advisory board independent of the executive and kept both parties honest, you know, and accountable, so that the executive team didn't have to worry about setting up the meeting and you know, getting everybody's diary sorted out, and they weren't chairing the meeting. They were focusing on the needs of the business, and likewise the advisors were kept on point, so it was always on topic. And that can be a challenging thing for CEOs. You know, they want to talk about a certain topic. In this case, the facilitator's job was to say, is that the most important thing? Because the advisors are telling me this, and this is what they want to discuss, and this is what they see as critical for your business. And to be able to have that open conversation about the priorities of the business to maximize the value that the advisors bring to the business. Another high functioning, an element to make an advisory board high functioning is transparency. And I think this was when Sarge was talking about the painful nature of the process at the beginning. For your advisors to really be valuable, they need to know your business as well as you do. And that means sharing, warts and all. And that can be confronting, because if something is going bad in your business, to get the value of the advisors, they need to know that. And they need to know what your thoughts are around why it's going bad. And what you're planning on doing, so that they can start to talk to you about options. And even wargaming this scenario of like, well, if you do that, what are the potential outcomes? It is hard because you work so hard on your business. And then you have these people come in and go, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Well, that may not work because of X, Y, Z. Have you talked to this person? Why haven't you talked to this person? And it feels like you're being interrogated. The trick, though, is to make sure it's respectful. And that's where the facilitator, the independent facilitator comes in, or chairperson comes in, to make sure that they maintain the proper momentum. So if the if the interrogation gets too much, to pull back, to give the executives a chance to respond, to take a breath, to not feel that they're being ganged up on, to also then challenge the advisors. Well, how would you do it? You've asked these questions. How would you do it? To draw out the expertise for the executive. Because when you're there with the advisors and they're asking a whole lot of questions, you can be like a bunny in a headlight. You might have had a pad full of questions to ask them, but when they've asked you a whole lot of questions about your business and you feel that you can't answer them, your mind goes blank. Again, the facilitator's role is then to ask questions on your behalf, to have that expertise to say, hey, you know, you're asking Saj about his digital marketing, for example. Okay, so this is what he's done. What have you done? What would be the path that you would take to help Saj out here? Let's discuss a way for him to come back to you, do his homework and come back. And so a high functioning advisory board has that person that is independent, who is there to keep both sides engaged at the right level with the right momentum. And that can be really hard. Saj, is that a fair comment, Saj? You went through this. You were one of my guinea pigs. So did I?
Yes. No, you're right. Like, you know, at the beginning, it is all of that. But once you get over that, they become aligned to you. Today I spoke to two of my advisors, two different advisors today, right today. But on an average week, I'm talking to them almost every day, and not just the same one. I've got a variation of 3, 4 in any week, because they know the business intimately. They know how you think. You tap into them and say, hey, I'm doing this. What's your thoughts? And they know it, and they're able to answer straight off the cuff.
Now, to be fair and unfortunate for Saj, he was our guinea pig. He was the first one we put through this program to really sort it out and get all the bits going through. So we've now streamlined that first few meetings to make sure it's an easier process, and we can we can actually word up the executive team on get these things prepared before, because this is what's going to happen. And in hindsight, that would have been a good thing for Saj. I remember our first meeting.
No, Mark, I want everyone else to go through that pain. Just I don't feel left out.
There'll be the war story sharing that will come about in our group celebrations.
Well, look, it's very true. And Wayne, you just put a comment up in the chat about talking through the hard issues. That's what your advisors should be there for. It's not just ideation. It's ideation about the hard issues. How do I resolve it? This has gone wrong in my business. And that brings in itself its own rewards. It brings your advisors closer to you. They become invested. And this is another issue with advisors. If you have independent advisors that aren't in an advisory board, a functioning advisory board that comes together and meets regularly, the relationship is with the CEO and the advisor. And the insight, while there can be insight, while it can be helpful, the value is a lot less. The advisors meeting each other and building off each other's experience to help you benefits everybody. The advisors benefit from the expertise from another advisor. It helps them crystallize their thoughts and advice. It helps the executive team take the information and process it and get another point of view from their experts. So, but once you get the advisory board working and invested, they become your biggest allies. When we recruit advisory boards, we start by saying, listen, an advisory board is about eight hours a month work. That's the commitment you have to make. It can be more, it can be less. And every advisory board we've created since we've done this managed advisory board, the advisors do way more because they become invested. They become your ally, and they're not just somebody that you speak to and say, I've got a question, what do you think? They're in there working with you. And often the advisor rings up and says, I haven't heard from you. What's going on? What did you do with the information I gave you? Give me some feedback. And that can only benefit you more because they become more invested. And it becomes this self-fulfilling thing. The advisors want to do good by you, so they work harder for you. And I haven't seen a variation in that since we've built this managed advisory approach, where we have the facilitator that actually is responsible for bringing everybody together and making them accountable for any commitments they make. That's another key thing. Advisors offer advice, but they often need to do some work for you. How do you hold them accountable? And having that independent chair or facilitator is how you do it without offending them, because they're doing you a favor. Depending on how you're enumerating them, they're doing you a favor in a lot of ways. That independent person's job is there. They know that person there is holding them accountable. You know, they can have that conversation. Oh, look, I've worked 20 hours this month for these guys. I've really got to go back to my own career. Okay, I can manage that. I can talk to the executive and make sure it all works. Yeah, sorry, I looked up, I saw I got a question from Scott. Is there a difference between an advisory board and a panel? Absolutely. A panel is generally a one-off. You know, you go and see a panel of advisors, they rotate very quickly. We did, again, this is my definition of a panel. I used to have, as part of the accelerator I ran up here, I had every month, I had a panel of experts that were available to people to answer your questions. That panel would change on a monthly basis. They are experts, but they don't know the depth of detail.
Yeah, and I must say I was part of one of those panels. When I got to Hong Kong, I was very graciously invited by Mark. And it's very easy to sit there as it's very easy to sit there as a panelist and go, have you thought about this, without having any of the history or any of the understanding of what's gone on, and all you do is take people down a rabbit hole.
You can, yes.
I had fun doing that.
So the advisory board goes on the journey with you. The first meeting might feel the same as a panel, but by the fourth or fifth meeting you've had advisory board, these guys should be invested in you. They should be, as Saj said, they should be talking to you on a regular basis, and you should be able to ring them up. Typically a panel, you get that one session and you're done. These guys are experts. They go back to their day job. The advisors are invested. They'll tell you what their limits are. They'll say, listen, I can do a couple of hours a week, but I can't do more than that. Okay, they've made that commitment. But they will learn your business and your issues. What happens with the advisory board is they become part of your network. And so one thing that we get from people, and this is another important aspect, people say, I want advisors to help me raise money. Okay, that's a great objective. However, most advisors would say, yeah, okay, not yet. Prove to me that you're worth the introduction. Prove to me that you're going to be around. Show me that you've got skin in the game. And you'll find over this period of time, the advisors become invested and they're putting skin in the game for you. And so their network opens up and they're like, you know what, I know somebody that you should talk to. It may not be about investment. It might be there's a connection over in this city or this country that you need to talk to, because that'll help your business. Customer, a contact, a supplier, a potential investor. And you'll find sometimes that your advisory board is connected to your customers. And we found that with Saj. As we were going through a particular customer analysis, one of the advisors said, I'm a personal friend of the CEO. Tell me when it's time, when you're ready, tell me when it's time to have a conversation with him, but not until you're ready. So you need to get the advisors to be invested in you. And the best way to get them invested in you is to be transparent and to let them into your business, warts and all. Go through that painful process and build the trust. And sorry, Saj, I wasn't expecting it to be as painful as you've expressed, but it's worth it. So I hope, Scott, that answers your question between a panel and an advisory board. Similarities at the start, but the advisory board should be way more invested and really become an extension of your organization.
I think that certainly does, but I think also the facilitator person makes a key difference as well in what I was perceiving as a panel would provide. So that's really critical. Thank you.
Not a problem. Okay, so I've covered what an advisory board is. Any questions on that one before I jump on to the next slide? I think I went quite detailed in that one.
That sounds like
okay. All right, so startups and advisors. This area, I want to go into a little bit of detail about where things can go wrong with advisors, with startups especially. And the number one area that I find people or startups go wrong is giving equity to advisors. You can't take equity back. It's okay to offer a path to equity for an advisor, but if an advisor is coming on and they want equity in your company and they haven't done anything for you yet, that's a big mistake. And I hear so many stories about people fed up with advisors and advisors don't work. You know, I gave this person 1% of my company and really all I got was to put their name on my website. Okay, you know, maybe if it's Elon Musk or something, that works fine. But if it's Mark Sims putting my name on your website, it doesn't do anything for you. I've got to work for that equity that I asked for. So it's okay to turn around and say to an advisor, okay, let's go through a dating process. And if you work out, then I have no problems with a little bit of equity. I even have no problems with a pathway to my board of directors. But to start with, you need to prove your value. The contrary to that is an advisor says, of course I'm valuable. And how do I trust you? Well, trust has to start somewhere. And if an advisor is worth their weight in gold, spending 3 months doing the dating process, you'd be nuts to burn them. So an advisor that doesn't trust you up front, that's a warning sign to me. And likewise, if the startup burns the advisor, that's going to get around. You know, that advisor has a network. So it is okay to say, I'm not okay with equity. I'll pay expenses. I might give you a retainer. I would like you to do it for free until we get to this point. Don't feel that the advisor has all the power. Okay. Advisors should be valuable and prove their value to you. And anybody that says to me that I'll be part of your advisory program, you've got to give me equity, that's the last conversation I have with them. Because we should be building you up. And if we are good at advisors, I would expect that at some point in the future, they say, listen, come on my board. Typically, when you ask someone to be on the board, you know, that's a legal responsibility. Offering a bit of equity is, given you're a startup, you probably can't pay them a Fortune 500 salary or director remuneration. So a little bit of equity is probably okay, given the legal aspect and the risks that come with it. As an advisor, there's very little risk. Consequently, the remuneration should be lower. However, it can grow. And advisors want to grow. They do want to get paid. We do a lot of work because we want to give back, but we also have to put food on our tables as well. So having a pathway to remuneration is an okay discussion.
Mark, can you do me a favour? Just pause your video and then unpause it. I've just frozen. Your video's frozen for a sec. Your audio's perfect.
All right, so stop video.
Pause. Yeah, great picture. And then
that's an old one. Am I back?
No.
Huh.
Got a black screen of death.
Let me try it again.
Just me? Someone else give me a bit of audio and let me know what you're seeing.
I can see you, Danielle. Mark's just popping up with just his static image at this point.
Huh. I wonder why.
It could be just bandwidth. Just unshare your screen, Mark, and then
yeah,
audio's fine. So just keep going, Mark.
Okay, so I've stopped sharing. All right, so I apologize for that. The page that I was looking at was I'm still moving in my own screen, so that's quite disorientating. The learnings from startups. So engaging with advisors, the remuneration. The next part of it is, who do you reach out to? A limiting factor for startups is, who is your network? Often you go and ask friends. Friends can be good, but when they come on board as an advisor, they can't just be your friend. They have to be really objective in how they deal with you, and they have to be critical. And if they're not prepared to be critical, then the value of an advisor diminishes rapidly. So when you're assessing somebody, don't just look at your friends. Sometimes getting on people that aren't your friends but are in your network can be more valuable. The other mistake I see with advisors is the chief executive will have a number of advisors and they'll call it their advisory board, but the advisors never talk to each other. You know, they're in isolation. The relationship is solely with the CEO, and that's okay. But there is more value to be had where the advisors are working together. I get feedback from CEOs saying that this is how I validate the worth of an advisor. I take their opinions, I take it to my next advisor. You know, I sort of paraphrase it, get their opinion, and I formulate my response in this area. And that's okay. But you can do that in public because advisors hold themselves accountable. All right. Just been told I've got 5 minutes until Q&A. Now, it's okay to ask other people to find you advisors. So just limiting yourself to your network, but you need to have something that's valuable to the advisor. Why are they going to do it? Often we talk about giving them a path to being on the board, but make it valuable to the advisor. Unique. You know, you're doing something interesting. There's a lot of people out there with a massive amount of experience that are looking for something different. So if you're doing something unique, you're probably more attractive to advisors than you think. If it's a niche market, there's a lot of people that are senior executives that actually want to get into the advisory space because they want to learn something outside their expertise area. And a lot of the advisors I recruit are looking to do work in sectors that are completely different to what they've grown up in. So they might be a mining expert, they've done operations. Operations can be transferred, but they don't want to talk about mining. They teach me about manufacturing. There's similarities, but it's different. And I'll feel better because I'm expanding my knowledge. There are a lot of people that are quite happy with that. Okay. All righty. 5 minutes to go. Any questions on that?
No, it's looking good. Oh, I've got your video back. I love it.
You got my video back?
Yep.
Yay.
Yep,
okay.
good.
All right. So I wanted to talk about engaging advisors for maximum effectiveness. Now, this is really important. We talked about a facilitator or a chair that's independent to the CEO. You also need to have an objective. Why are they there? You can't just have an advisory board. Be on my advisory board. Why do you need this person? What's the skill set? How? And we tend to try and do advisory of 3 to 5. Why do you need these people in this skill set? What's the objective over 3 to 6 months? Very similar to a business. It should align to what your objectives are over 3 to 6 months. Make it clear why they're there. It shouldn't just be a random chit chat every time you talk to them. It should be set like a formal business meeting. The agenda is set, the information packs are given in advance, the advisors do their homework, be prepared for the meeting. And what we do with ours, we've just started doing this, the teams have to present videos because people are busy, they don't want to read. So you know, the theory was they'll be on the train or whatever coming home from work, they'd watch the video. Okay, so people have been in lockdown in Melbourne, hasn't quite worked that way, but they still prefer to do that video and get the emotion behind the metrics as opposed to just a report. So we run it so that the executives do a 15-20 minute video talking about what's happened since the last meeting and the key agenda items. The facilitator then reaches out to the advisors and says, right, go and make sure you're ready to answer these questions. And then when the meeting comes in, we get straight into it. Here's the topic, get into it. Okay. Make it count. Don't waste their time or your time. They are professionals and so are you, and treat them as such. If you're just having a chit chat, people will fall off and they'll become ineffective. And you'll also see that advisory boards will say that they don't do much. It's nice to have, but it doesn't do much. These guys should be challenging you all the time, but you should be challenging them. If you don't agree with what they're saying or asking, you should be pushing back. What makes you say that? Our research has said this. You seem to be countering what we have come up with. Why? Why should we listen to you and not the research we've done? They're your advisors. You can challenge back because they'll be challenging you. They've got the easy job. Okay. So that's sort of a snapshot of what an advisor is, advisory boards, how it can be effective for startups. I wanted to conclude just by talking about the GAP program that EI has put in place and how it's a little bit different. So everything I've talked about now so far is part of the GAP, with one additional element that we've thrown in for good measure to actually really to accelerate the whole program and make it more effective. We've thrown in a coach, an executive coach on all of our boards. That executive coach coaches the executive team and the advisors. And the reason we've done this is a lot of advisors have come from executive positions where they are in charge. So they tell. Your advisors shouldn't be telling, they should be advising, which means convincing, which means you need to believe what they're saying, not just do what they say. So they need to transition from this executive role into this advisory role. So to make this work, we have the facilitator that is independent, and we've brought in the coach who makes sure the advisors transition into that Q&A discussion. They're pitching their ideas and why they're experts and why you should listen to them, but also coaching the executive team on how to get the best out of the advisors for every session. And what we see is the effectiveness of the advisory board improves tenfold. And Saj, this might be another one that I pull you back in on. The coach. How have you found the coach in the advisory board program? If I might draw on you for some real life commentary.
Yeah, so right off the top, it's crucial. It's the heart of, see, you go through all the objective, rational thinking and logical thinking, but then there's an element of how to deal with it emotionally, where to put your energies, how to get yourself out of that thinking, emotional rhetoric and get out of that and think and clearly focus. And that's where the coach came in. You know, sometimes you get a slap, come on, wake up, stop doing that. And then it's sometimes, no, it's fine, it's, you're doing well, don't give up. Okay? You know, I give up, I really do. And he's like, no, hold on, don't beat yourself up, it was fine. Or, you know, what's going on here, where's your head at? And you know, yeah, it's sometimes just you can get into that rabbit warren, that hole, and it just needs someone to wake you up and say, hey, it's not as bad as you think, or it was better than you think. So highly valuable and a really important part of the process.
And just on that, the coach becomes valuable because they have the insight of coaching everybody. So they sit on the advisory board meetings, they talk to the advisors and coach the advisors on how they can be better advisors. They coach the executive team. So without breaking any confidential aspects of it, they have that ability to have a different form of insight in the approach, because it can be overwhelming. You present a plan and the advisory board, especially in the early days, the advisory board goes, but why? It can be debilitating to have that coach go, no, see it for what it is. They're trying to push you up. You can do this. And to also go back to the coach, the advisors and say, guys, you don't have to be as brutal. Be honest, but not as brutal. You know, there is that, they take it to heart what you say. And that element of independence as well, to provide that feedback, lifts the whole team, because everybody is getting feedback on their performance every session. And it just changes the dynamic. And it was a crucial element to differentiate how we do our managed advisory boards. Now with that, I'm going to go into Q&A.
Yep, absolutely. Come into Q&A, because I'm sure there'll be a couple of questions. We have a few minutes left for that. Mark, thank you. That was fantastic. Please just feel free to pull yourself off mute and with preference, perhaps pop your camera on. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, Daryl, you do. Just pop yourself off mute there, Daryl. Pop you and Mark side by side.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for that. It was really good. Could you just expand a little bit more on the difference between a facilitator and a coach?
Okay, absolutely. All right, so the facilitator, the way we've structured it in the GAP And people will have different ideas of what the facilitator is. So it's traditionally the chair type of role. In a typical advisory board, the chair is a participant, a voter, and somebody that provides opinion. What we have done in our program is the facilitator is neutral. They do have an opinion, they can speak, but their job is to be master of ceremony and be relatively neutral. So their role is to keep everybody focused in the meeting and to be focused on their actions and business commitments post meetings. Okay, so think of it as an administrative role. Daryl, you commit to going and doing some research or making an introduction for the executive team. My job is to make sure, as a facilitator, is to follow up on that and say, by the way, next meeting's coming up. This is an outstanding action item. Have you done it? Right? And if you haven't done it, when will you do it? And it takes that responsibility away from the executive. Also, in the meeting, it's the role of the facilitator to make sure everything is cordial, so that while the advisors will ask lots of really hard questions, the facilitator needs to be aware of what's going on, to be able to interject and say, right, okay, let's take a break, and be able to speak on behalf of the executive and say, okay, so Daryl, you've asked these questions. Let's take a moment. Maybe you can rephrase that in terms of what you would have expected to see, to give, in this, I'll pick on Saj for a moment, give Saj a break to collect his thoughts. How that differs from the coach. The coach in the meeting tends to be a bit more quiet. They're absorbing everything. They're watching how people interact. They're watching, and it works very well on video as well. I didn't think it would, but it worked very well. Watching the emotional drain, because you'll see people get fatigued over a course of 2 hours. You'll see advisors getting a little frustrated. The coach is watching everything. And then afterwards, the coach will follow up with the executives. What do you think? How did it go? Here's what I saw. How do you think you could have made it better? Likewise with the advisors. Right. So you're still telling and not advising. How can we get you from instructional to advisory? How could you soften the blow? How could you get your message across to be convincing and not dictatorial? And that's a key one, right? Because especially if they've come from the executive angle, this is their first advisory board. They're used to saying to their minions, you need to do this and I need it by Friday. Well, it's no longer their business. They're there at the request of the executive and they can be removed. We don't want to remove them, so we need to keep the relationship strong, respectful and strong. The coach's role is to make sure everybody remembers that, provide the advice to maximize their involvement and to be better participants in the advisory meetings and post the advisory meetings. Does that help clarify?
Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thanks. Great question. Great response. One more question in our little time that we have left. Does anyone want to pop their hand up? Scott, I can see you popped your video back on. Did you have a question? Yeah.
No, I didn't. It was just that he said to put your video on. So I followed instructions.
That's great to see you. Does anyone else have a question of Mark? No.
Danielle,
Yeah.
I have a
Yes. Please. Who was that?
Sarah, I think.
Sarah.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for that presentation, Mark. That was really interesting. I was going to ask, we have a very small startup new business, and it's really sort of the first time I'm hearing about advisory boards and how they work and obviously the benefit that comes out of them. And I wanted to ask, at what stage do you think you should be discussing setting up an advisory board within the business?
Now, the advisory board, the key thing with an advisory board is getting the right advisors. So another thing that we do is we make it clear to all our advisors that their life expectancy on an advisory board should be around 6 months. Because if the company's not moving, we're not doing them a service. And the advisory skills should match the needs of the business today. So when we match up and create an advisory board, we're looking at the next 2 quarters and the next year. And how do we get you there? And sometimes the advisory skills are the same over a year, but it should change. If an advisory board's been in place for 5 years, that tells me that there's a problem. So in your case, you'd be looking, I don't know if you're pre-revenue or you're actually in revenue stage.
Pre-revenue.
Okay, so your advisory board would be very different to a post-revenue advisory board, and having the right people now allows you to get the right head start. So you'd be talking about things like product market fit. How do you get engaged with your customers? How do you make sure, do the things that don't scale? Everybody talks about scale, scale, scale. Well, actually at pre-revenue, you're probably going to do the things that don't scale. That's different advice to the people that tell you how to scale. And then once you get to your post-revenue, you've got your first 10 customers or something, your advisory board would change. And that's an important conversation to have with your advisors. If advisors are thinking this is a cushy job for life, I'm going to have a nice portfolio with these guys, I'll just sit back and talk to them 1 hour a month, you've got the wrong person. Advisors should want to really grow you and then move on to another advisor. They should have a portfolio that's constantly evolving, in my opinion. A good advisor should be moving towards and giving their expertise. And they get access to different industries, different insight. But yeah, right now, you could benefit from an advisory board as long as you were looking at the people that could help you in that pre-revenue stage. If you've got a social media expert right now, probably wrong, unless you're already in the acquisition stage, just haven't got revenue yet. So it's important to also know your business, what your needs are, so that you can match the advisors, the skill sets. And this is another warning I'd like to say to business owners. We do this thing called a health check, and it's really important. It's a self-assessment, and what we do it for a very important reason. What companies and what founders tell me they need in their advisors is usually not what they need. They've got this preconceived idea of, I need somebody who's going to raise money for me and get me into international markets. Sounds great. And then when you do this sort of status check, health check of where you're at, it's too early. If you go to an overseas market now, you'll die. If you go to an investor, you'll spend all this time and you'll be wasting your time where you should be trying to get customers. So really having a good assessment of where your business is now and the needs you need for the next 3 to 6 months before you go and get an advisor, and mapping those skill sets is crucial, and it's valuable anyway for your business.
Fantastic. Now, Mark, I know that we're all riveted. Everybody wants to hear you talk all night. We could just have a bathroom break now and then come back, for breakfast. Thank you so much, Mark. We try to really pride ourselves on finishing as close to time as possible.
Understand.
We have recorded this session, so if you've been listening to this session and you'd like to review it at some stage, take some more notes, or if you perhaps know somebody that has been talking about advisory boards and they would love to have a listen to it, I'm sure Liz will be able to get that to you. So on behalf of us all here, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and our vision for advisory boards, and there is nothing like this in the world. We haven't seen a program like this. It is an innovative venture all unto itself, and you're more than welcome to reach out and talk to Mark, to talk to Vlad, to talk to Alira or I. You can reach back through any of our emails that come out to you, and we'd be more than happy to share more information with you. What's coming up? I might go on.
Danielle, sorry, before you go. So I've been doing a lot of talking, but I have to give credit where credit's due. So while I did come and pitch this idea to Danielle, this program would not exist without Danielle, Vlad, and Alira. The team has really supported this, and Vlad is my offsider. I know he's on mute in there, but he has been
person.
Well, he's my equal. It's not as my right hand. He was my equal, and he made this vision possible. And if it wasn't for this team, it would still be an idea with me in the background going, I think this will work. So credit where credit's due.
Yeah, no, look, we've had the opportunity to showcase Vlad so often. And we really wanted to have you have a bit of a spotlight, but
more quiet. I'm in the background. I'm quiet. Thank you so much.
You're being
I really appreciate it.
No, we fully acknowledge and recommend that that Vlad has been an integral, equal part of this program. And I was actually thinking next year I'm going to grab him on board and get him to do a session on how do you coach your advisors, because he's an excellent coach. One many of us have already experienced. So what's coming up next? We have Eastern Vic Founders Meetup on the Thursday, the 26th of November. So it's always the last Thursday of each month. And we're very proud to present one of our board members who happens to hold the role of landing pads manager for Oz Industry for the federal government, which is landing pads are the global pads that Australia has throughout the world. Sorry about that, guys. And she's going to come on and talk about the things that you need to be doing right now if you have any intention of going global with an innovation business or innovation venture. So looking forward to that. And good night, good evening, and we hope that you've been incredibly inspired by what Marcus had to share today.